Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing the exact opposite of what I did for a video prior, which was a video in which I explored the worst scenario for the Democratic Party in the 2024 presidential election, state by state. So, today we're going to be doing the same thing, but vice versa. What is the worst the Republican Party can do, and how will that look? So, again, as always to these videos, a few disclaimers. So, first of all, this is not by any means a prediction. I'd be willing to bet like a lot of money that this will not be the map, or this map wouldn't even come close to happening. And this video assumes a lot of things that probably aren't going to happen. There's a set of circumstances in which the Democrats do very well in 2024, but that set of circumstances might not be the set of circumstances we live in 2 years from now. And so when I make these statements like, if this happened, like if X happens, then Y will come, sure. But don't assume that X is going to happen. Don't grill me in the comments because I label a state a way in which it might not vote in 2024 and you disagree with that. Because, yeah, if I give a state to Harris by only a point here, chances are she'll probably lose it by 10 in a general election because this is her best case scenario, not my actual prediction. So with all that out of the way, I'm just going to get into it. Here we're going to fill out the states, then this now would be very safe for Harris. She'd win, not New Mexico, Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico and Colorado. New Mexico would be safe in this scenario because, again, if Harris was able to get the incumbent bump with Hispanics and just kind of this trend, she'd do very well in New Mexico. Hawaii, Illinois, Virginia, if trends continue there. All of these states. New Hampshire would be safe as well because, again, you're looking at a state that voted for Joe Biden by 7. And if college-educated whites really swing to the left in this election, it would be safe. New York as well. Maine at large would be safe if the Democrats just improved in rural Maine and stopped, the total collapse there. And I think, and she'd also win the 2nd district of Nebraska by a safe margin because they only made the seat about a point more Republican in redistricting. And so if she did really well there and if Omaha kept really shifting to the left, she'd win it by that 15-point mark, which would be classified as safe. But again, that's a stretch. So for Trump, he'd still win a few states by safe margins: Idaho, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska at large. I'm actually not going to touch that 1st district just yet. He'd win Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and Missouri, West Virginia, and I think that's it. So Trump does win, in case you're wondering, Trump does win Indiana and Missouri by safe margins, despite the fact that they were closer than a lot of states that I haven't touched yet, because they're trending to the right, and I just don't see a scenario in which they'd even come close to, it's 15 points for Harris at best. So I guess I could see one of them being, maybe likely best case scenario, but just for the simplicity, I'll have them as safe. Now for Harris, in this scenario, she'd have a lot of likely states. I think she'd do really well in Nevada and Arizona if things were to go, well for her, obviously. If we're winning these states by safe margins, she'd win them by, 7 or 8% or something like that. They'd be pretty good margins of victory for Kamala Harris. So then you've got Nevada and Arizona, and these two states are, like I said, Harris would probably win them by 7 or 8 in the best case scenario. They'd vote pretty similarly. Nevada would come with decreased rural turnout plus continued trends in Washoe, plus Harris just doing the best of all worlds in Clark County, which would get, to about an 8, maybe 9-point march to victory in Nevada. Arizona, she'd win by a similar amount because she'd do really well with Hispanics. Native turnout would be high, and you'd get continued trends towards the Democrats in suburban Arizona, all while rural northern Arizona would decrease in turnout. So you get that for Harris to do well in Arizona. She'd win Michigan, Minnesota. I'll even say Pennsylvania there just for kicks by safe or by likely margin in this scenario. Again, I do not think that these states are going to vote this way. My current prediction, I think I have Pennsylvania being lean Republican. So it's very different. But Minnesota was already a Biden plus 7 state. I could see a scenario in which Harris loses the election but still wins Minnesota by a likely margin. So that's pretty much already booked up. Michigan's interesting because Biden won it by a little under 3%. And so for Harris to win it by more than Biden and get past that 5-point mark, she'd have to do really well in exurban and suburban Detroit, meaning that she'd have to do very well in Oakland, even Ingham County. Oakland, Ingham, and Livingston are the 3 largest suburban counties of Detroit, and so if she's able to do well there and improve on the Biden numbers there, she'd, that alone is a few points in terms of margin, but to pile it on, she'd have to do really well with black voters in Detroit. She'd have to continue the good trends for Democrats in the Grand Rapids area, and then that gets you to about a 5, 6, maybe 7-point win if things go really well in Michigan. Pennsylvania, she'd win by just over 5 in a best case scenario, and I know it's crazy to say because, 2 years ago at this time, people were saying that Biden was going to win Pennsylvania by 5 at the very least. And I always thought that claim, was pretty interesting. But, so Pennsylvania is a state in which the Democratic Party is fundamentally able to win elections by more than the Republican Party is. So in a best-case scenario vote for both these parties, in the past, Democrats usually won them by 10, Republicans only won them by 2 or 3. And so that's because the Democrats have a bigger machine in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Erie. They can do really well in those cities if they really need to, and if they can, rack up the numbers there. And they can also do very well in suburban Philadelphia and suburban Pittsburgh in a way that Republicans can't. So if Harris were to do these things, that would get her to a victory. But the reason that this, margin is a little smaller than it would have been for Biden or Obama is because Kamala Harris does not have that rural appeal no matter what goes well for her and what doesn't go well for her. She would still lose rural voters by, more than Obama and Hillary Clinton in some cases too, even. And she still wouldn't do particularly well in Scranton or in that, the Pennsylvania 8th District region. So Harris, I say, wins Pennsylvania in this scenario, but not by as much as Obama did in 2008, for example. So next up, you've got Georgia. Yeah, Harris already won the election, so if you're just going to click off now that you saw she won the election, that's kind of, you can do that, but I think it should have been fairly obvious by the title as being her best case scenario. Georgia is intriguing because we don't know exactly the Democratic ceiling there, because 2020 was the first year the Democrats did really well in Georgia and that they won it. So we'll have to see. For now, I'm just going to keep it at 5, 6, 7 point victory somewhere in that range in a best case scenario for Harris. But yeah, I think that she'd win Georgia by that amount if she did really well in the suburbs and if she continued that shift of momentum in the state towards Democrats. Now, for Republicans, they've got, if you just got to kind of clean up this area out here, Montana, Idaho, Kansas, 2nd District, 1st District, Nebraska, Iowa. These states all come to mind for likely Republican states. So, for Utah and Montana, you can kind of knock these out, by kind of the same region. You'd have decreased rural turnout. The conservatives that voted for Trump in 2016, 2020 kind of bowing out of the race and maybe even voting for Harris, which again is not likely, but it's theoretically possible. Kansas, you get just the trends in Kansas City are really good for Democrats. Democrats are starting to grow in Wichita, which is why they're optimistic long term for the state. But in 2024, it's not going to flip no matter what happens. So, in the Harris versus Donald Trump matchup, it would, in a best case scenario, vote for Trump by 11 or 12 or something like that. Kind of like a Bollier versus Roger Marshall type margin. Iowa is similar to Kansas. Democrats have decent trends in the big cities, but the state's just getting so rural and so white that it's kind of washed out for Democrats now, and I would doubt Harris would do better than Biden here. So best case, she loses it by 7, maybe 8. But yeah, then you've got Mississippi and South Carolina, which are the same thing there. If she did really well with black voters and if she got that turnout to really high numbers, she could make these states both less than 15% margins of victory for the former president. And then Alaska, too, I'll put it on there. Alaska's tough, but I guess I'll just say that, I do expect the state to vote, for Trump by, 8 to 10 if he ran again. But in this best case scenario, it'll probably be closer to a 5-point margin of victory for Trump. It'd kind of be like the opposite of Pennsylvania, in that Trump would do, well in the state, but he wouldn't do very well relative to expectations or circumstances. So Alaska would vote for Trump, but by, only 5 or 6. And so now I think it's more important we get our attention to the more toss-up-y states. So Harris in this, for her lean states, she probably wins North Carolina. That's the obvious one. It was a state that Joe Biden in 2020 won by, or lost by, I think 1.7% or 1.9%. It was a little under 2, I think. It was 1.4%. The 1.7% number was the Cal Cunningham number. So Cunningham lost by 1.7, Biden lost by 1.4. And so in North Carolina, if Harris did really well with black voters plus, because the thing is, suburban North Carolina is not as blue as suburban Georgia, suburban Texas, or even some parts of suburban Florida. And so if Democrats can really start to get that, accelerate that shift, then you're talking about North Carolina being competitive, and then you're talking about it, potentially flipping in a best-case scenario for Harris. So she'd probably win those. She'd probably win North Carolina by a, margin of 2, maybe 3% if she did really well in the suburbs. I just think it's suburbs because rural North Carolina can get redder, and in this scenario, kind of stay the same. It wouldn't get redder, and that doesn't change anything fundamentally. But if the Democrats were to do really well with black voters, get the turnout up, and the suburbs start to chip away at those margins, they'd be winning it, and probably in the best case by 2 or 3, like I said. So then you're going to get into our lean Trump states. So Trump does win a few of these states by a lean margin. So first is Maine's 2nd district. He wins Maine's 2nd district by a lean margin in this scenario because, look, Jared Golden still won this race. He still would have a chance in 2022, but 2024, it's Maine 2nd's not voting below the presidential level for a while, and even if Harris did really well in New Hampshire, it'd take a lot to win this seat, so she'd probably lose it by 4 at best for her, I guess, is my guess, but the seat fluctuates, so I wouldn't be stunned if this scenario does happen, if I'm totally wrong. So, yeah. Now, if we're looking at the remaining 4 states, I don't really know. Actually, okay, I'll knock out Ohio, but the remaining 3 are tough. So, Ohio is a state in which Donald Trump did really well in 2020. He was expected, I think I had him winning it by only 3 or 4, and he was, supposed to, the mainstream media had it as a toss-up essentially, and he won it by 8. So he did really well in the state, and he did well with working class voters. He actually did better in Ohio in 2020 than 2016 with working class voters, which a lot of people did not think was possible. But he proved them wrong. He did really well here. And so as a result of this, what you're probably getting is Harris getting back to the Clinton 2016 numbers in the Mahoning Valley. You're getting really good numbers out of Delaware County and Greene County and Warren County, which are the suburbs of Cincinnati and Columbus. And then Cleveland is, kind of stops that shift towards the right, and you're going to get a not narrow, but maybe, a 4 or 5 point win for Trump, which would be narrow for Ohio standards, not really narrow for the nation as a whole. So then the remaining 3 are all tilt states. I think I'll give... so Wisconsin voted for Biden in 2020, so I guess theoretically it stays for Harris. I'm really skeptical of Wisconsin staying for Harris. I think she'd definitely lose it. Biden would definitely lose it too, although by a little less. But in this best case scenario, you get Wisconsin voting for Harris by like a Biden-type margin because she'd just hold on to that coalition. But that coalition doesn't really exist anymore. It's Biden voted in 2020 is kind of like a last hurrah. It's like, the last dance with, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, etc. I think actually, Evan Scrimshaw made that reference on my podcast for Pennsylvania, but it also applies to Wisconsin in that Biden won it, for the last time as a Democrat, I think for the foreseeable future. So Wisconsin would, I would assume Wisconsin would stay blue in this best case scenario for Harris, but like you're really looking at, it gets really iffy once you're past the point of, does Harris improve in Waukesha? Does she improve in outer Milwaukee? Because that, to envision that she have to start to improve with white, college-educated men and women who are generally Republican, and, that gets dicey real fast. So Wisconsin, I guess I'll say, would, hold Democrat in the best-case scenario, but it's really iffy. Texas, though, I think would flip. It would probably be, for fun, I'll have it as lean just to be bold. I'll have it as lean. But I don't really, think it's, I don't think it's going to be a state that the Democrats would necessarily, do well and even on its own, because 2024 will be interesting to see in Texas because, yes, the suburbs of San Antonio, not really Houston, but San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas that are trending left do vastly outnumber the Rio Grande Valley, which is trending right. But it would help, obviously, Democrats and Harris if they were able to kind of prefer those trends in the Rio Grande Valley. So like I said with New Mexico, generally speaking, incumbents have a bump with Hispanics for whatever reason. In 2012, Hispanics were the only group that Obama did better than 2008. 2004, Bush did, I think, 9% better with Hispanics than he did in 2000. So anyways, the point is Hispanics generally do trend to the right, or not to the right, but to the incumbent, which in 2020 was the right, in 2012 it was the left or whatever. But the point being here is that if Harris gets that incumbent boost with Hispanics, and if she can really, really accelerate those trends in, Tarrant County, Denton County, Collin County, Fort Bend County, Bexar County, Williamson County, then you're getting to a point in which she could win Texas, but it's not theoretically likely. So, lastly, you got Trump. I think Trump takes Florida. Hypothetically speaking, I guess you would say that Florida could I wouldn't be stunned if this if Harris is winning Wisconsin and Texas, she probably wins Florida, but I'll give it to Trump because I haven't really given him a ton of stuff this video, but I'll give him Florida. It's it's really hard to tell because Hispanics in Miami-Dade are really what it comes down to. Harris would do, in this best-case scenario, she'd continue the trends in Jacksonville, Tampa, and Orlando, but Miami is really what matters. Miami is where the money is in terms of Florida, and so if Harris were to improve in Miami and get back to Hillary Clinton 2016 numbers by using some sort of black magic, sure. I mean, getting Miami-Dade back to pre-Biden levels would be witchcraft. But if it were to happen, like if Harris were able to revert those voters and get those voters back, despite the fact Democrats have been losing them for the past 6-8 years, it would, I guess, hypothetically flip. But I don't think that's going to happen. She would do better than Biden if she gets that bounce of Hispanics, but it wouldn't be a big enough of a bounce to flip the state or, get Miami-Dade back to 2012, 2016 numbers. So I think that's the map. I'm pretty satisfied with this map. Florida and Wisconsin I'm really iffy about. Texas, I think, I could be a bit less generous, but, just for fun, we're still 2 years out. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you really enjoyed it and you want to be awesome, go listen to my podcast. You can look up Ryan Jakubowski on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. It's also here on YouTube if you prefer YouTube for your podcasts. You can go listen to that. It's Politics Matters Podcast. I'm releasing episode 5 hopefully on Sunday. Got a guest coming on hopefully. Yeah, so if you like that, listen to my podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Ryan Jakubowski. And that being said, thank you and have a good rest of your day.